The coat was too bright, they said, too green, too soft, too feminine. In the dim light of a Salvation Army thrift store in Willow Creek, Montana, 17-year-old Elias Kane clutched the emerald wool coat to his chest, its delicate buttons glinting like secrets he wasn't ready to share. By the time he wore it to school, the whispers had already turned to jeers, and by lunch, he was nursing a split lip in the bathroom, the coat stuffed in his backpack like a shameful memory. 5 years later, Elias stood in the same town, now 22, his breath fogging in the crisp December air. Willow Creek hadn't changed much. Same narrow streets, same weathered storefronts, same judgmental stares from folks who'd known him since he was a kid. But Elias was different. He wore the emerald coat again. It's him brushing his knees, his chin high despite the knot in his stomach. He wasn't here to fight old battles. He was here to start something new. The community center loomed ahead, a squat brick building strung with Christmas lights that flickered like they were on their last legs. Elias adjusted the stack of flyers in his hands, each one proclaiming the first annual Willow Creek Winter Drive. Warm coats, warm hearts. His idea, his mission, born from a memory that still stung but no longer defined him. He pushed open the door, the bell jingling, and stepped into a room buzzing with skeptical faces. Elias Kane, drawled Mrs. Hargrove, the town's unofficial gatekeeper, her eyes narrowing over her glasses. You really think you can waltz back here and play hero? Her voice carried the weight of every rumor that had chased Elias out of town years ago. Rumors about his clothes, his mannerisms, his heart. He smiled, tight but genuine. Not a hero, Mrs. Hargrove. Just someone who knows what it's like to feel cold. The room went quiet. Elias set the flyers on a table, his hands steady despite the eyes boring into him. He'd spent years running from Willow Creek, from the bruises and the laughter, but running hadn't warmed the ache inside. Now he was back, not just for himself, but for everyone who'd ever felt like they didn't belong. Across the room, a woman with a sharp bob and a leather jacket caught his eye. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Marisol Vega, the new art teacher at Willow Creek High, had arrived in town 6 months ago, and already she'd stirred things up with her bold murals and unapologetic attitude. Elias didn't know her well, but he'd heard she didn't take kindly to small-town politics or small-town prejudice. "You're the coat guy, huh?" Marisol said, pushing off the wall and sauntering over. Her voice was low, teasing, but her dark eyes held a spark of curiosity. "Heard you got run out of here for wearing something. Scandalous." Elias's lips twitched. Scandalous is one way to put it. You here to help, or just to spectate? She smirked, picking up a flyer. "Depends. What's the deal with this coat drive? You collecting hand-me-downs, or what?" "It's more than that," Elias said, his voice softening. "It's about giving people something that makes them feel seen. Not just warm, but theirs. Coats they'd choose for themselves, not just what's left over." Marisol raised an eyebrow, studying him like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "You're serious about this?" "Dead serious." She nodded, slow and deliberate. "All right, coat guy, I'm in. But don't expect me to play nice with the Mrs. Hargroves of the world." Elias laughed, the sound surprising even himself. For the first time in years, Willow Creek didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a beginning. Over the next week, Elias and Marisol threw themselves into the winter drive. They set up donation bins at the diner, the library, and the hardware store, each one painted with Marisol's vibrant designs, swirls of color that made people stop and stare. Elias knocked on doors, pitched to local businesses, and even sweet-talked the grumpy owner of the town's only department store into donating a dozen coats. Marisol, meanwhile, rallied her art students to create posters, turning the drive into a community project that buzzed with energy. But not everyone was on board. At the weekly town council meeting, Mrs. Hargrove stood up, her voice sharp as she waved one of Elias's flyers. "This is a waste of resources," she declared. "We've got a food bank to worry about, and now we're supposed to care about coats?" And from him, The word carried a venom that made Elias's skin prickle, a reminder of every taunt he'd endured. Marisol shot to her feet before Elias could respond. "With all due respect, Mrs. Hargrove, maybe you'd care more if you'd ever gone a winter without a decent coat. Elias is doing something real here. What are you doing besides complaining?" The room erupted in murmurs, some approving, some scandalized. Elias caught Marisol's eye, and she winked, unapologetic. He felt a warmth spread through him, not from the coat, but from something deeper, someone believing in him, maybe for the first time. As the meeting ended, a lanky teenager approached Elias, his hands stuffed in his pockets. "Hey, I'm Jamie," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I like your coat. I got one kind of like it, but I don't wear it. People talk." Elias's heart clenched. He saw himself in Jamie's hunched shoulders, the way his eyes darted around like he was waiting for a blow. "Wear it," Elias said softly. "It's yours. Let them talk." Jamie nodded, a small smile breaking through. Elias watched him go, feeling the weight of his own words. This was why he'd come back, not just to give out coats, but to give people like Jamie a reason to stand tall. By the end of the first week, the donation bins were overflowing, and Elias and Marisol were sorting through piles of coats in the community center's back room. The air smelled of wool and mothballs, but to Elias, it was the scent of possibility. Marisol held up a bright red parka, her grin infectious. "This one's got personality," she said. "Who do you think it belongs to?" Elias chuckled. "Someone brave. Someone who's not afraid to be seen." "Like you?" she asked, her tone half teasing, half serious. He met her gaze, his chest tight. "Maybe. Getting there." As they worked late into the night, the space between them felt charged, like the air before a storm. Marisol's laughter, her quick wit, her fierce defense of him. It was pulling Elias in, and he wasn't sure he wanted to resist. But Willow Creek wasn't a place where love came easily, not for someone like him. Not yet. The community center's back room became their war room. Elias and Marisol spent hours sorting coats, tagging them with sizes, and planning the distribution event. The pile grew daily, puffy jackets, wool trenches, even a few vintage furs donated by an eccentric widow. But with every coat, Elias saw more than fabric. He saw stories, choices, identities. He wanted every person who received one to feel the way he did when he first found that emerald coat, like they could be themselves, unapologetically. Marisol's presence made the work lighter. She'd blast music from her phone, everything from punk to salsa, and tease Elias when he fumbled the lyrics. "You're hopeless, coat guy," she'd say, tossing him a scarf to fold. But her eyes lingered on him, and Elias felt the weight of it, a pull he couldn't quite name. One evening, as snow fell outside, Marisol sat cross-legged on the floor, sketching in her notebook. "What's that?" Elias asked, peering over her shoulder. She tilted the page toward him, a vibrant drawing of a crowd in colorful coats, their faces blurred but joyful, set against Willow Creek's snowy skyline. "It's what I see when you talk about this drive," she said. "People coming together, not just surviving winter, but living it." Elias's throat tightened. "You get it," he said quietly. "Most people don't." "I get what it's like to not fit in," she replied, her voice softer than usual. "Grew up in a town like this, but in Texas. Latina, queer, and way too loud for their liking. I learned to make my own space." Elias froze, the word queer hanging between them. He'd never said it out loud, not about himself, but it had always been there, a truth he'd buried under layers of fear. "How'd you do that?" he asked. "Make your own space?" Marisol closed her sketchbook, her gaze steady. "You stop hiding. You are what you want, love who you want, and let the world deal with it." Her words hit like a spark. Elias wanted to ask more, to tell her about the nights he'd spent questioning himself, about the boys he'd never dared look at too long. But before he could, the door swung open, and Jamie burst in, his face pale. "They trashed the bins," Jamie said, breathless. "The ones at the diner." Spray paint, ripped coats, everything. Elias's stomach dropped. He and Marisol followed Jamie to the diner, where the donation bin sat overturned, its contents strewn across the snowy sidewalk. Red paint spelled out slurs across the bin, words Elias knew too well. Marisol cursed under her breath, kicking a shredded jacket aside. "Who did this?" Elias demanded, his voice shaking with anger. Jamie hesitated. "I saw. Some guys from school. Derek and his crew. They've been talking crap about the drive. About you. Derek Harlan." The name brought back memories of high school. Taunts, shoves, the crack of a fist against Elias's jaw. Derek had been the ringleader then, and apparently he hadn't changed. Marisol grabbed a trash bag from the diner and started salvaging what she could. "We're not letting this stop us," she said fiercely. "They won't tear us down? We'll build it back bigger." Elias nodded, but the weight of those words, spray-painted, hateful, clung to him. That night, he couldn't sleep, replaying the vandalism, the jeers from years ago, the way his father had looked at him when he'd come home with that coat. "You're embarrassing us," his dad had said. Elias had left for college the next year, vowing never to return. But he had returned, and now he had to decide what that meant. The next morning, Elias and Marisol rallied the community. They cleaned the bins, repainted them with Marisol's designs, and put out a call for more donations. To Elias's surprise, people showed up, parents, shop owners, even a few kids from Jamie's school. They brought coats, blankets, and words of support. "This town's better than this," one woman said, handing Elias a quilted jacket. "Don't let the jerks win." By midweek, the drive was back on track, but the tension lingered. Elias caught whispers at the grocery store, saw pointed looks at the gas station. Derek and his friends were spreading rumors, calling the drive a stunt and Elias a freak. Marisol brushed it off, but Elias felt the old wounds reopening. On Friday, they held a coat-fitting event at the community center. Families lined up, kids giggling as they tried on jackets, adults thanking Elias with quiet sincerity. Jamie showed up, wearing a teal coat that made his eyes light up. "It's mine," he said, grinning. "First thing I've ever picked for myself." Elias's heart swelled, but the moment was cut short. Derek and his crew stormed in, their laughter loud and cruel. "Nice party, Kane," Derek sneered, eyeing Elias's emerald coat. "Still playing dress-up?" Marisol stepped forward, her voice like steel. "Get out, Derek. Nobody wants your hate here." Derek's smirk faltered, but he didn't back down. "This town doesn't need your kind of help," he said, glaring at Elias. "Or your kind of anything." The room went silent, every eye on Elias. He felt the weight of their stares, the same weight he'd carried at 17. But this time, he didn't flinch. "This isn't about me," he said, his voice steady. "It's about them." He nodded toward the families, the kids clutching their new coats. "You want to tear that down? That's on you." Derek's face reddened, but before he could respond, Jamie stepped forward, his teal coat bright against the dim room. "Leave him alone," Jamie said, his voice trembling but firm. "He's doing more for this town than you ever will." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others stepping closer to Elias. Derek's crew shifted uncomfortably, then slunk out, the door slamming behind them. Elias let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Marisol squeezed his shoulder, her touch grounding him. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said, and for the first time he meant it. The confrontation with Derek left a crack in Elias's resolve, but it also lit a fire. He and Marisol doubled down, turning the winter drive into something bigger than either of them had imagined. They partnered with a local seamstress to repair damaged coats, and Marisol's students painted a mural on the community center wall, a cascade of colors depicting people of all ages and backgrounds, each wearing a vibrant coat. The town started to buzz, not with rumors, but with excitement. Elias noticed a shift in himself, too. Working with Marisol, seeing Jamie's confidence grow, watching families leave with coats that fit their bodies and their spirits. It was healing something he hadn't realized was still broken. But the closer he got to Marisol, the more he wrestled with feelings he'd long suppressed. Her laugh, her fierce loyalty, the way she saw him, it stirred something he wasn't sure he was ready to face. One night, as they sorted coats by candlelight during a power outage, Marisol broke the silence. "You ever think about staying here?" she asked, her voice soft in the flickering dark. "After the drive, I mean." Elias paused, a navy pea coat in his hands. "I used to think I'd never come back. Too many ghosts. And now—" He looked at her, the candlelight catching the edges of her face. "Now, I don't know. Maybe there's something worth staying for." Her lips curved, but she didn't push. Instead, she handed him a coat, a deep purple one with silver buttons. "This one's for you," she said. "Figured you might want to mix it up." Elias laughed, but his heart raced. He slipped on the coat, feeling its weight, its possibility. "You trying to start a scandal?" "Maybe," she teased. "You look good in it." The moment hung between them, heavy with unspoken words. Elias wanted to say something, to tell her how her presence made him feel braver, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he just smiled, and they went back to work, the air between them electric. The next day, a new challenge emerged. The town council, led by Mrs. Hargrove, proposed redirecting the drive's funds to a more practical cause, like road repairs. Elias and Marisol attended the meeting, armed with stories from the families they'd helped. "These coats aren't just clothes," Elias said, his voice steady despite the nerves. "Their dignity, their choice. You can't put a price on that." Marisol backed him up, presenting her students' mural as proof of the drive's impact. "This is what community looks like," she said, pointing to photos of smiling kids in their new coats. "You want to take that away?" The council voted to keep the drive's funds intact, but the victory fell fragile. Elias knew people like Mrs. Hargrove wouldn't stop pushing back. Still, the support from others, shop owners, parents, even a few council members, gave him hope. As the distribution event approached, Elias and Marisol decided to make it a celebration. They planned live music, hot cocoa, and a coat-fitting area where people could choose their own. Jamie volunteered to help, his teal coat now a fixture at every event. "I told my mom about it," he said one day, his voice shy but proud. "She's coming to the event. She wants to meet you." Elias's chest tightened. He remembered his own parents' rejection, the way they'd looked at him like he was a stranger. "That's big, Jamie," he said. "You're brave." Jamie shrugged, but his smile was wide. "You make it easier." The night before the event, Elias and Marisol stayed late, stringing lights and setting up tables. Exhaustion weighed on them, but so did a shared sense of purpose. As they sat on the community center steps, sharing a thermos of coffee, Marisol turned to him. "You're not what I expected, Elias Kane." "What did you expect?" he asked, his voice low. "Someone broken," she said bluntly. "But you're not. You're building something." He looked at her, his heart pounding. "You're helping me build it." She held his gaze, and, for a moment, he thought she might lean closer. But she just smiled, nudging his shoulder. "Don't get sappy on me, coat guy." The event day dawned bright and cold, the town blanketed in fresh snow. People poured into the community center, their laughter and chatter filling the air. Elias watched as kids ran to the coat racks, trying on jackets with gleeful abandon. Parents thanked him, some with tears in their eyes. Jamie's mom hugged Elias, whispering, "Thank you for seeing him." But as the event hit its peak, Derek and his crew returned. They didn't barge in this time, just stood outside, shouting slurs and holding signs that twisted Elias's heart. Marisol started toward them, but Elias grabbed her arm. "Let me handle this." He stepped outside, the emerald coat bright against the snow. Derek smirked, but Elias didn't flinch. "You don't get it, do you?" Elias said, his voice carrying over the crowd. "This isn't about me. It's about them." He pointed to the community center, where people were laughing, connecting, choosing. "You can't stop that." Derek's smirk faded. The crowd inside began to spill out, standing behind Elias, their presence a quiet force. Derek's crew hesitated, then backed off, disappearing into the snow. Elias turned back to the crowd, his heart racing but full. Marisol was there, her eyes shining. You did that, she said. We did that, he corrected. The Winter Drive success rippled through Willow Creek. Local news covered the event, calling it a beacon of hope in a town that rarely made headlines. Elias and Marisol were hailed as heroes, though Elias cringed at the word. He wasn't a hero, just someone who'd turned pain into purpose. Still, the gratitude in people's eyes, the way Jamie's mom hugged him, the kids who ran up to show off their new coats, it all felt like a kind of redemption. But redemption didn't erase the past. Late at night, when the community center was empty, Elias would sit among the leftover coats, memories creeping in. His father's voice, sharp and cold. Why can't you just be normal? The sting of Derek's fist. The loneliness of leaving Willow Creek, thinking he'd never belong anywhere. He'd built something here, but part of him still felt like that 17-year-old kid hiding in the bathroom with a bloody lip. Marisol noticed. One evening, as they packed up the last of the coats, she sat beside him, her sketchbook open to a new drawing. Elias, in his emerald coat, surrounded by a crowd of smiling faces. You look sad in this one, she said, pointing to his sketched figure. Why? Elias hesitated. I keep waiting for it to fall apart, he admitted. This town, it's not exactly known for accepting people like me. People like you? Marisol tilted her head, her eyes searching. You mean queer? Or just different? He swallowed, the word heavy on his tongue. Both, I guess. I've never really said it out loud. She nodded, no judgment in her gaze. You don't have to, but if you want to, I'm here. Her words unlocked something in Elias. He told her about high school, about the coat that had felt like a rebellion and a curse, about the boys he'd liked but never approached, the fear that had kept him silent. Marisol listened, her hand resting lightly on his arm, her presence steady. When he finished, she said, You're not that kid anymore. You're changing this place. And maybe it's changing you too. Elias looked at her, his heart pounding. You make it sound easy. It's not, she said, her voice soft but fierce. But it's worth it. The moment stretched, and Elias felt the pull again, that spark between them, growing stronger. He wanted to reach for her, to close the distance, but fear held him back. What if she didn't feel the same? What if he was misreading everything? Before he could decide, a new problem arose. The town council, still led by Mrs. Hargrove, announced a surprise audit of the Winter Drive's finances, claiming concerns about mismanagement. Elias knew it was a ploy, retaliation for challenging the status quo. Marisol was furious, but Elias felt a cold dread. If they found any discrepancy, the drive could be shut down. They spent days combing through receipts and donation records, their nerves fraying. One night, as they worked late, Marisol slammed her laptop shut. This is ridiculous, she said. They're just looking for an excuse to stop us. I know, Elias said, rubbing his eyes. But we can't give them one. Marisol leaned back, her expression softening. You're stronger than you think, Elias. You've been through worse than this. He met her gaze, and for the first time, he believed her. They worked through the night, double-checking every number, every detail. By morning, they had a flawless report, ready to present to the council. The audit meeting was tense, Mrs. Hargrove's questions sharp and accusatory. But Elias and Marisol were prepared. They laid out their records, their voices calm but firm. The council had no choice but to approve the drive's continuation, and Mrs. Hargrove's face was a study in barely concealed frustration. As they left the meeting, Marisol grabbed Elias's hand, her touch sending a jolt through him. We did it, she said, grinning. Told you we're unstoppable. He squeezed her hand, his heart racing. Yeah, we are. The drive expanded, with nearby towns reaching out to replicate it. Elias and Marisol trained volunteers, their partnership growing stronger with every late-night planning session. Jamie became their unofficial ambassador, his confidence blooming as he spoke about the drive at school assemblies. Elias watched him with pride, seeing the kid he'd once been finding his own path. But the closer Elias got to Marisol, the more he wrestled with his feelings. He'd never been good at love, never trusted it. Yet every time she smiled at him, every time she stood up for him, he felt himself falling. One evening, as they walked through the snowy town square, Marisol stopped under a street lamp, her breath visible in the cold. "You're quiet tonight," she said, her eyes searching his. "What's going on?" Elias took a deep breath, the words spilling out before he could stop them. "I think I'm falling for you." Marisol's eyes widened, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she stepped closer, her hand brushing his. "Good," she said, her voice soft but certain, "because I'm already there." Elias's confession hung in the air, fragile as the snowflakes falling around them. Marisol's response, her quiet, certain, "I'm already there," felt like a lifeline. Under the street lamp, with Willow Creek's lights twinkling in the distance, they stood close, their breaths mingling in the cold. Elias's heart pounded, but for once, it wasn't fear driving it. It was hope. They didn't kiss, not then. Instead, Marisol looped her arm through his, pulling him toward the diner. "Come on, Coke guy," she said, her voice light but warm. "Let's get some hot chocolate. We've got a lot to talk about." Inside the diner, they sat in a corner booth, the neon sign casting a pink glow over Marisol's face. She told him about her own journey, coming out as bisexual in a conservative town, leaving Texas to find a place where she could be herself. "I thought I'd have to keep moving," she said, stirring her cocoa. "But then I came here, met you, and I don't know. It feels like I'm finally home." Elias's chest ached with the weight of her words. "I want to believe that," he said. "But this town, it's got a long memory." "Then we make new memories," she said, her eyes fierce. "Starting with us." Us. The word settled over Elias like a warm coat, one he hadn't known he needed. They talked until the diner closed, sharing stories of their pasts, their fears, their dreams. When they finally stepped back into the snow, Marisol took his hand, and this time, Elias didn't hesitate to hold on. The winter drive grew, but so did the pushback. Derek and his crew hadn't given up. They spread rumors online, calling the drive a scam and Elias a fraud. Anonymous flyers appeared around town, accusing him of using the drive for personal gain. Elias tried to shrug it off, but the accusation stung, especially when he saw Jamie's worried face. "We need to fight this," Marisol said, her jaw set. "Not just for the drive, but for you, for Jamie, for everyone who's watching." They decided to host a town hall, a chance to set the record straight. The night of the event, the community center was packed, the air thick with tension. Elias stood at the podium, his emerald coat a beacon in the crowd. He spoke about the drive, about the families they'd helped, about the kids like Jamie who deserved to feel safe in their own skin. "I came back to Willow Creek because I believe in this place," he said, his voice steady despite the nerves. "Not the hate, not the rumors, but the people. The ones who show up, who care, who choose kindness over cruelty." Marisol stood beside him, presenting a slideshow of the drive's impact, photos of smiling families, thank you notes from kids, the mural her students had painted. The crowd listened, some nodding, others whispering. Mrs. Hargrove sat in the front row, her face unreadable. When it was time for questions, Derek stood up, his smirk sharp. "How do we know you're not pocketing the donations?" he asked, his voice loud enough to carry. Elias's stomach twisted, but before he could respond, Jamie stepped forward, his teal coat bright under the lights. "I know," Jamie said, his voice shaking but clear. "Because I've seen what he's done. He gave me this coat, and he gave me courage. You don't get that from someone who's lying." The room erupted in applause, and Elias felt tears prick his eyes. Marisol squeezed his hand under the podium, her touch grounding him. Derek sat down, his face red, and the questions turned to support, people asking how they could help, how they could keep the drive going. After the town hall, the rumors quieted and donations poured in. Elias and Marisol planned a second distribution event, this one bigger, with live music and a coat design contest for kids. Jamie's design, a rainbow-patterned parka, won, and Elias watched with pride as the teen accepted a prize, his mom cheering from the crowd. But the victory felt bittersweet. Elias's parents hadn't come to the town hall, hadn't called, hadn't acknowledged the drive. He'd hoped, maybe foolishly, that they'd see what he was doing and soften. Marisol noticed his quiet moments, the way his smile faltered when he thought no one was watching. One night, as they sorted coats, she pulled him aside. "You're carrying too much," she said. "Your parents, this town, all of it. You don't have to do it alone." Elias looked at her, his heart full but heavy. "I don't know how to let go." She took his hands, her grip warm and steady. "Start with this," she said, and leaned in, kissing him softly. The world fell away, and for the first time, Elias felt like he could breathe. The kiss was a promise, a beginning. They didn't have all the answers, but they had each other. And as the snow fell outside, Elias knew he was ready to fight for this, for Marisol, for the drive, for the home he was building, one coat at a time. The kiss changed everything. Elias woke the next morning with Marisol's warmth still lingering in his mind, her words echoing, "Start with this." For the first time, he felt like he could start over, start fresh, start building a life where he didn't have to hide. But Willow Creek wasn't a fairy tale, and the winter drive success didn't erase the town's sharp edges. The second distribution event was a triumph. The community center overflowed with people, music, and laughter. Kids ran around in coats from Jamie's rainbow design, their faces bright with pride. Marisol's mural was unveiled to gasps and applause, its colors a bold declaration of unity. Elias stood at the coat racks, helping a shy girl pick a bright yellow parka. "It's like sunshine," she said, beaming, and Elias's heart swelled. But trouble brewed outside. Derek and his crew hadn't shown up, but their influence lingered. A group of protesters, small but loud, gathered across the street, holding signs that called the drive propaganda and Elias a troublemaker. Mrs. Hargrove was among them, her face pinched with disapproval. Elias tried to focus on the event, but the signs were a reminder of how fragile progress could be. Marisol pulled him aside during a lull. "Ignore them," she said, her voice fierce. "They're just noise." "This," she gestured to the crowded room, the smiling faces, "this is real." Elias nodded, but the weight of the protesters' words pressed on him. He thought of his parents again, their silence louder than any sign. He hadn't seen them since he'd returned, hadn't dared knock on their door. But as the event wound down, he made a decision. "I need to see them," he told Marisol. "My parents. I can't keep avoiding it." She squeezed his hand. "Want to come?" He shook his head. "This one's on me." The walk to his childhood home felt like stepping back in time. The house hadn't changed. Same peeling paint, same creaky porch. Elias knocked, his heart in his throat. His mother answered, her face a mix of surprise and wariness. "Elias," she said, her voice flat. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to talk," he said, his voice steady despite the ache. "About the drive. About me." His father appeared behind her, his expression hard. "We've seen the news," he said. "You're stirring up trouble again." Elias took a deep breath, the emerald coat heavy on his shoulders. "I'm not stirring up trouble. I'm helping people. I'm trying to make this town better." His mother's eyes softened, just for a moment, but his father's voice was cold. "You've always been too different, Elias. Always had to make a scene." The words cut, but Elias didn't flinch. "Maybe," he said, "but I'm not ashamed of who I am. Not anymore. I just wanted you to know what I'm doing, and that I'm still your son." He turned to leave, his chest tight, but lighter somehow. His mother called after him, "Elias, wait," but he kept walking. He wasn't sure what he'd expected, but he'd said what he needed to. For now, that was enough. Back at the community center, Marisol was waiting, her sketchbook open to a new drawing. Elias and her, standing together in a sea of coats, their hands linked. "How'd it go?" she asked. "Not great," he admitted, "but I'm okay." She hugged him, her warmth grounding him. "You're more than okay. You're incredible." The drive continued to grow, with donations coming from neighboring counties. Elias and Marisol were invited to speak at a regional charity conference, their story inspiring others to start similar programs. Jamie joined them, his confidence a testament to the drive's impact. "I want to do this someday," he told Elias. "Help people like you helped me." Elias's eyes stung. "You're already doing it, Jamie." But the protesters didn't stop. One night, the community center's windows were smashed, the mural defaced with slurs. Elias and Marisol arrived at dawn, their hearts sinking at the sight. "This is personal," Marisol said, her voice shaking with anger. "They're targeting you." Elias nodded, his jaw tight. "Then we fight back. Not with hate, but with more of this." He gestured to the coats, the mural, the community they'd built. They organized a cleanup, and the town showed up in droves. Parents, kids, even some of Mrs. Hargrove's allies. Jamie's mom brought coffee, her eyes fierce as she helped scrub the paint. "This isn't right," she said. "You're doing good, Elias. Don't stop." By evening, the mural was restored, brighter than before. Marisol added a new detail, a figure in an emerald coat, standing tall. Elias knew it was him, and the sight made his heart ache with pride and gratitude. As they stood together, watching the sunset, Marisol took his hand. "We're not just giving out coats," she said. "We're giving people a reason to hope." Elias looked at her, his heart full. "And you're giving me a reason to stay." She smiled, and this time they didn't hesitate. They kissed under the fading light, the world quiet except for the soft fall of snow. Winter deepened, but Willow Creek felt warmer than ever. The winter drive had become a movement, not just in town, but across the region. Elias and Marisol were flooded with messages, thank yous from families, requests from other towns to start their own drives, even a feature in a national magazine. Elias's emerald coat became a symbol, not of shame, but of courage, of choosing to stand out. Yet the fight wasn't over. Mrs. Hargrove and her allies pushed for a town ordinance to limit disruptive community events, a clear jab at the drive. Elias and Marisol rallied the community again, packing the council meeting with supporters. Jamie spoke, his voice clear and strong, telling the story of how a coat had given him confidence to be himself. "This drive isn't just about staying warm," he said. "It's about feeling like you belong." The ordinance was voted down, and the crowd cheered. Mrs. Hargrove left without a word, but Elias didn't feel triumph, only resolve. Change was slow, but it was happening. One snowy evening, Elias and Marisol hosted a final coat distribution before the holidays. The community center was packed, the air alive with music and laughter. Kids showed off their coats, some designed by Marisol students, others donated by families who'd been helped the year before. Jamie's rainbow parka was everywhere, a bright reminder of what they'd built. As the night wound down, Elias's mother appeared at the door, alone. Elias froze, his heart racing. She looked older, her eyes tired but soft. "I saw the magazine article," she said. I didn't know how much this meant to you." Elias swallowed, his throat tight. "It's not just about me. It's about all of them." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm proud of you, Elias. I should have said it sooner." They didn't hug, not yet, but her words were a start. Elias felt a weight lift, not all of it, but enough to keep going. After the event, Elias and Marisol walked through the town square, the snow falling softly around them. She wore a bright orange coat, a gift from Elias, and he wore the purple one she'd picked for him. They stopped under the same street lamp where they'd first admitted their feelings, their hands linked. "You did it," Marisol said, her voice warm. "You gave this town warmth in every way." "We did it," Elias corrected, pulling her close. "And we're not done." They kissed, the snow swirling around them, and Elias knew this was home. Not just Willow Creek, but Marisol, the drive, the community they'd built. He'd been rejected for a coat, for being himself, but now he was giving warmth to an entire town, one heart at a time. The next winter, the drive grew bigger, with Jamie leading a youth committee and Marisol's murals popping up across the county. Elias's parents started showing up, quietly helping at events. Derek and his crew faded into the background, their hate drowned out by the community's love. Elias wore his emerald coat every day, not as a rebellion, but as a promise to himself, to Marisol, to everyone who needed to know they could be seen, loved, and warm. And as he looked out at Willow Creek, blanketed in snow but alive with color, he knew he'd found his place, not by running, but by staying.